These are the best touchdown picks game by game week 10. The thing that I'm the most focused on here is going to be this late week injury for Tet McMillan. He popped up on the injury report on Friday, but if he does get out there, I like him as a long shot in this game. I think it's one of those situations where we're kind of just looking at what has this opposing defense been able to do against opposing wide receiver ones, and they've allowed the third highest touchdown rate to those players. So I think Tet McMillan is interesting, even though they're not throwing a ton. He's a nice long shot at these odds. And also Rico Dowdle, in terms of the most likely touchdown score, makes a ton of sense. Obviously, this team's been able to run the ball effectively in any matchup. He's got 100 plus yards in 7 of his last 9 starts going back to last season. And even last week against Green Bay as like double-digit underdogs, they still got it done, and they're still willing to run in different game scripts. So I think as a home favorite now in a much better matchup against New Orleans, I think that Dowdle is the one that makes the most sense to get in the end zone in this one. In terms of Atlanta and Indianapolis, I think that this is one of those ones where you just lock in Jonathan Taylor as the most likely to score. I think that if you want to throw Bijan in there, Drake London, obviously 3 touchdowns last game, still makes a ton of sense. But running backs have scored 42% of the fantasy points against the Falcons this season. That's the highest share in the league. So getting JT back on track here and back in the end zone. I don't know if there's a great flyer in this game, but I think JT is probably the most likely to score. If we're talking about Giants and Bears, I think you could probably make an argument for both of the running backs in this game, but I think that the low-key sharp long shot in this game is Wan'Dale Robinson. I talked about this earlier in the week in one of the short form videos, but I think if we're just looking at the matchup, it's kind of sharp. Chicago's the worst team in the NFL at defending slot receivers, allowing a league-high touchdown rate to that area of the field. So I don't really love a best pick in this game, but I think the long shot with Wan'Dale Robinson still makes a ton of sense. So I'm all over that. Jacksonville and Texans. So this one, obviously the dynamics of this game have changed significantly with CJ Stroud not in. And I think it's one of the lower game totals of the week as well. But I think from an upside perspective, I think if Mills is at least capable at getting Nico Collins the ball, he's still the best touchdown pick in this game. The team in general, I like to look at some of these defenses that really struggle to defend the best weapon on the other side. And Collins has just destroyed the Jaguars historically, 100 yards in 4 straight games against Jacksonville. And Jacksonville has also allowed the most fantasy points per game to wide receiver 1 target. So give me Nico Collins. Bills and Dolphins. This is probably the most fun game to make touchdown picks. I actually have 3 of them for you guys today. Devon Achane is going to be the most likely to score. Only Tennessee has allowed more rushing touchdowns per game to running backs than Buffalo. And give me Josh Allen on the ground and also Dalton Kincaid through the air in this same game. Miami's allowed the 2nd most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks this year, and the Dolphins have allowed the 5th highest touchdown rate to tight ends. Plus, Kincaid already scored on them back in week 3. So you got 3 touchdown picks in this game, one of the higher totals, and I think it's a really interesting one if we can get any pushback for Miami. Baltimore and Minnesota, another one of these games that I think has at least shootout potential. The most likely to score, Derrick Henry. I think that they've kind of gotten a little bit away from him, like around the goal line. At least they did last week. I think he gets in the end zone with this one. They have a high total. It's also a team that's been run on. I guess the inconsistency of Minnesota's run defense has been well documented. And I think that just with the high team total, top 5 at least, that Derrick Henry gets in. But the long shot in this game is going to be Mark Andrews. And the reason for this is Lamar has absolutely crushed the blitz historically. These blitz-heavy teams have not had a lot of success against him. And if you're looking to kind of find a player that he targets the most often, it's going to be Mark Andrews against the blitz. Also, Minnesota has been getting destroyed by tight ends as well. David Njoku, Aranda Gadsden, Sam Laporta, all of them scored and almost put up 65 plus yards. So I think that if we're going to be targeting something against the Vikings, and Andrews is one of those guys that obviously has scored a bunch of touchdowns recently as well. If we're looking at the Cleveland Browns and New York Jets, the thing that you have to focus on for Quinshon Judkins, I think he's the most likely to score in this game, is do we think the Browns can win this game? Yes, it's the Jets. Do we think they can play from ahead? Potentially, because it is the Jets. So I think that if we're not going to be looking at a situation where he can get the game script out of a game, he's always going to be a solid bet to score. It does look like the shoulder injury is not going to be affecting him any longer. So I think he's interesting. From a long shot perspective, David Njoku. I was fully expecting David Njoku to get traded at the deadline, but now he falls into like one of the best matchups for tight ends. Only the Bengals have allowed more TDs to the position. So give me Njoku and Judkins. Patriots and Bucks. Yeah, so with Mike Evans gone or sidelined, Chris Godwin also sidelined, Emeka Egbuka is the one that's going to continue to see this outrageous target share, 30+% target share with both of those guys out. The question here is if Gonzalez is going to shadow. He did not shadow London last week. London scores 3 touchdowns. So will they adjust there? I think is the big question. I consider Travion Henderson. I think that there's a really good chance that he has a great game here and maybe has that big performance we've been waiting for. I do think that in general, though, with where Egbuka is playing, he does play a decent amount in the slot as well. He'll be able to get away from Gonzalez and still is the most likely to score in this game. Cardinals Seahawks. I'm going back to Old Faithful. Jackson Smith and Jigba in this one. Leads the league with 4.4 yards per route run. Also, Arizona has not allowed a touchdown to a wide receiver one this year. I think this is the game where it happens, and I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba gets it done. You could make an argument on the other side for Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. They've obviously been unlocked, but I still feel the best about Jackson Smith and Jigba in this game. Not going to throw a long shot out there. Rams and San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, the guy that has just been getting absolutely peppered with targets, but also just seeing obviously all the rushing work as well. 50% of his team's touches over the last few weeks. Christian McCaffrey is the most likely to score in this game. And then Devontae Adams, just the packages that they're doing around the goal line have been completely insane. Scored 8 times this season, 5 touchdowns over his last 2 games. So I don't think there's any receiver out there that has more touchdown equity than him. 16 end zone targets, 60% of his team share into the end zone as well. So love Devontae Adams to score each and every week. And then if we're looking at this one, the Lions and Commanders. So last week, Jahmyr Gibbs ended up spending a ton of time in pass protection against the Vikings and didn't get as many touches as he should have. But if they go back and look at this, they just lost. They didn't get Gibbs enough work. I think he scores in this one and gets a lot more touches in general. And then from a matchup perspective, the best long shot is pretty clearly Sam Laporta. Only the Bills have a higher Vegas team total, but the Commanders allow the second highest touchdown rate to tight ends. So I'm in on Sam Laporta in this one. Looking at Sunday Night Football, Steelers, Chargers. This one was also relatively difficult. Things could go a lot of different ways. I do think the Chargers are going to have a really tough time running the ball against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's defense, their run defense, has been elite. They just basically shut down JT for like 40 yards. Also, Josh Jacobs for like 30 yards. So I think that without Joe Alt, without Joe Alt, I think that the Chargers are really going to struggle to run the ball. And I'm expecting a ton of pass attempts here. And if we're just looking at like a matchup perspective, I think it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers use Jalen Ramsey, similar to what they did against Warren last week. But I still think that Gadsden is the best bet to score in this game. He is going to be a long shot, but the Steelers have been just absolutely shredded by tight ends, bottom 5 in basically every category, including touchdown rate allowed to tight ends. So give me Gadsden on Sunday Night Football. Eagles and Packers. Pretty clearly, I think the touchdown equity for the Packers, Josh Jacobs, he scored at least 1 touchdown in 19 of his last 20, and I think that's kind of what's going to keep him moving here in this game. But if we wanted a long shot, I wanted to see who has been, I guess, doing super well against this Green Bay team, and it's typically the opposing wide receiver one from a touchdown perspective. So this was kind of an interesting one too. They're 28th in touchdown rate allowed to opposing wide receiver ones. But Brown has been a little bit better against man coverage than zone coverage. So I don't know if there's going to be a ton of volume going A.J. Brown's way, but I do think he has a really solid chance to score a touchdown.